Now think of Joan Miro and you probably think of bright colours and fun compositions. The Catalan artist has long been appreciated for the agreeable dimension to his art. Now he's having a resurgence, with dozens of exhibitions scheduled around the world between now and 2018. Far from showing us the image of Miro that we feel we already know, these exhibitions will be showing us the many different and sometimes dark sides to his work. Central to the last quarter century of his career was a studio in Mallorca, which he designed to specification. So important was it that a Barcelona gallery has decided to bring it to a London audience. Belle Lupton went to have a look.
This is the studio on the Spanish island of Mallorca that Catalan artist Joan Miro built for himself in 1956. He worked there until his death 27 years later. It was the most productive and exciting period of his career. And now you can see it in London. Using photographs from the 1970s and the memory of Miro's grandson, the team have created a life-size replica of the artist's studio in Mallorca. The idea is to give visitors a fresh and more personal context in which to view the artist's work. But there's one thing they couldn't bring over, and that's the Balearic sunshine. Miro's grandson has dedicated his career to his grandfather's work. As a child, he would explore the artist's studio. So what does it tell us about Miro, the artist?
This studio tells us about his basic idea of never stop surfing on top of the wave, which means that when he was in Mallorca, he was not the old retired man that we all thought about. He was a very contemporary, radical artist, reinventing himself every single day.
And you obviously have strong memories of your grandfather. How close were you with him during this period?
Well, when I was there, I was 11 years old, he was 83 years old, and we were very close to each other because he liked to be able to be surrounded by the innocent eye of his grandson, Joan. Because when you are that age, you have no education that really jeopardizes your curiosity. So he was able to see how my reaction were to his colors and forms and shapes and materials.
Miro designed the studio with his friend, the architect Josep Louis Sert, who was living in the US at the time, having fled Spain after the Spanish Civil War. The pair corresponded by letters to build the workspace Miro had been dreaming of since the 1930s. So does this make Miro as much of an architect as he was an artist?
Absolutely yes, because for me architecture is one of the most important arts in the world, because you have combined light, space, volumes and heights.
He had previously been in Paris in very small studios and elsewhere as well. What did this big space that he created himself, what did that mean for him?
He has been going through the First World War, the Spanish Civil War, the Second World War, and moving around different spaces. But finally, when he settled down in Mallorca, then he was able to have his own studio. And then the whole concept of art making blossomed.
It was here in his 60s that Miro freed himself from the bright, neat patterns of his earlier work and started splashing paint onto canvases using brooms and his fingertips. You were allowed into your grandfather's studio, I believe, only at the age of 10, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Now, why had you not been allowed in before then?
I was too young.
What was he scared of? Was he scared you'd knock things over? Or
yeah,
why?
because sometimes we used to do very funny games in his house. And he thought, these children, they will destroy everything in the studio. They are too dangerous. I want to wait until they are 10 years old to let them in.
How did your impression of what your grandfather was doing change once you were allowed into the studio?
It changed totally. It changed radically, because I saw Grandpa working and listening to music and reading poetry at home in the afternoons. And it was one thing, but when I walked in the studio, it was like opening a totally radical, revolutionary world in front of my eyes. And I discovered the power and the energy of my grandfather. That it was for me something unknown, because he was already in the 80s, and seeing him in the studio, he was a 20-year-old young man.
On the walls of Miro's studio are newspaper clippings, advertisements, leaves, all inspiration for his art, including a photo of his close friend Pablo Picasso.
Was Picasso ever in the Mallorca studio? Did he ever come to visit?
No, never. Never, because he said, I will never walk into a Spanish from Francisco Franco. And unfortunately, Picasso passed away 2 years before Franco. That was 1973, and Franco died in 1975. And that was a terrible, terrible problem, because he would never, ever come back home.
Tucked away on the island of Mallorca, Miro was shielded from Francisco Franco's dictatorship, but he remained immersed in politics, and many of his works during this time were painted in a state of frenzy.
We have an idea of what we think the man is like, but you had a very different idea.
He was an extremely loving, caring person, and through his blue eyes, he was able to communicate to you an amazing peacefulness, mixed up with troublesome circumstances that were surrounding him.
Much of the art here is for sale. The Barcelona gallery curating this show has its eye on London, one of the world's biggest art markets. But they're also trying to do something a bit different by presenting it in a studio setup.
Here you can come and you can find not only pieces, not only masterworks that Miro painted. You can find also ceramic, like painting tubes. We are continuing the legacy of Miro because we are trying to reinvent the exhibitions.
The gallery doesn't want this show to stop people visiting the original, though. Miro has around 2,000 paintings and 500 bronze sculptures to his name. What you see here in London is just the tip of the iceberg. Belle Lupton, TRT World, London.